Hey everyone, and welcome to Office Hours episode number 13. We're getting these going, and I've got a lot of content for you after taking off last week while in Mexico. So we'll get right to it in a minute. But before we go, I wanted to share one of my posts this morning and highlight one of our partners. And what I shared in the post this morning, I said I'm really bullish on franchise opportunities. And there are a lot of franchise opportunities out there. We've got our great partners, veteran service brands out there that are doing it. But this particular opportunity is with GBC Food Services. And here's the thing. It's a franchise opportunity. It's open to either SkillBridge or direct hire. And with SkillBridge, the idea is you go in and you get 3 to 4 months to run a franchise, run it. You don't have to buy the franchise, but you get to see how the franchise runs. You get to see the funds that come in. You get to see the work schedule. You get to see the revenue you're making and the salary you would be making if you owned it. And it's a try before you buy it. And here's the thing. With most franchises, the number one thing in most businesses, the hardest thing to do is to build up your sales pipeline, your clients. And with these opportunities at GBC Food Services, these are the sushi stands, the cut produce like cut fruits and veggies, and the deli stands in big box grocery stores. So, you don't have to build the clients for that. People are literally walking in to do their food shopping. And so I will tell you that when I spoke to one of their C-suite leaders, he said on average they make between $2,000 and $5,000 a week. So if you times that by about 50, that's $100,000 to $250,000 a year running your own business, and there's a lot of tax benefits that go along with that as well. So, if you're interested, I would tell you to please check out the GBC Food Service franchise opportunities on the Hire Military site. And if you have questions, reach out to either Amber Pitkin or Lucy Robinson, and I'm sure they'll get back to you. All right. Let's get into the actual topics of discussion for today. I'm going to move my right microphone a little closer because I'm really excited. I will tell you that if you have questions at any point on a topic I'm discussing or a random question related to the military transition, please just drop it in on the comments, and Olivia behind the scenes will highlight it for me and leave it up there for me to answer. So please drop it in the chat, in the comments, and we'll get back to it. All right. So I'm going to start off. I got 2 weeks of content to give to you. The first thing I'm going to talk about is outreach, right? So you are looking to grow your network. You want to get to know people in a desired industry, a desired company, a desired role, or desired location, right? And so you're figuring out how to reach out to people and connect. And maybe there's a stressor of you needing a job. Maybe there's some challenges you're facing getting into the field, or you want to include all the extra stuff. What I'm going to tell you is don't include all the extra stuff. I'm not a big fan of sending an in-mail with a connection request because in-mails are long. I'm going to tell you that your first outreach to someone should consist of and fit within the 300 characters you get when you send a message with a connection request. So all you do is go to connect. It'll say, do you want to add a message? Said yes. If you are on the mobile app, go ahead and hit the 3 dots and hit personalize invite. You get 300 characters right there that you can write why you want to connect. That's the first ask. What I'll typically tell people is show that you went to their page, highlight something you have in common or something nice about specific to the person you're connecting with, and make the very first ask, very small. So either to join their professional network. I love saying, if I'm sending the request, I'm going to ask to join their professional network, regardless of the size of mine, right? I'm the asker. There's a little bit of EQ there. And then if you want to make another ask, maybe ask for some advice. If they're a veteran, maybe ask for a call in the next few weeks, a short call, and come prepared with questions for that. But I will tell you, if someone is not going to accept a 300 character or less connection request with a help ask for advice, they're sure as heck not going to answer an 8-paragraph life story, right? And I get those sometimes, and it's sad, but it puts me in an awkward position. And I want you to think about this. You send me an 8-paragraph life story. There's an expectation that I'm going to match effort, but if I don't know you, that's not fair. right? So often I'll send a 1 or 2 line response if I respond at all. And again, then it just puts me in a bad place. So I'm going to tell people first outreach, 300 characters or less, highlight what you have in common, make the first ask really small, not for a job, not for introductions, none of that stuff. Really like connect and maybe get some advice. If they accept the connection request, you'll see it, go in and follow up and say, thanks for connecting. Do you have a few minutes to give me some advice? It's a great way to just start small and build from there. Now, the next one is something that I do on the platform. I encourage everyone to do. And basically, it's support people that are open to work. Look, like 2 weeks ago, there were like 35,000 high performers in the tech industry were let go just because of restructuring, right? And I knew a whole bunch of them, and they were high performers, but the company had an issue. And so I'm seeing a lot of people in the veteran recruiting space, a lot of DEI recruiting, a lot of recruiting, talent acquisition in general with this weird market we're in. And so what I'm going to tell you is that when I see open to work and it looks like someone is legitimately open to work, not just starting their transition and still has a year before they can go, if I see someone has the green banner up and they post that they're open to work, without fail, I click support. And then I type in, wishing you the best in your search, right? Very simple. Takes me like 5 to 10 seconds max. But what it does is that sends that person is looking out to my extended network of like 372,000 people, right? Hopefully creating some opportunity. And we don't need everyone to have the same size network of me, but if 5, 10, 15, 20 of you drop a support or a like in a comment, what we're doing is we're basically rippling that person's requirement that they're looking for a job across the billion people on LinkedIn. And all we need is one person in a hiring position, one recruiter looking to fill a role, or somebody that knows them and didn't realize they were in need to see it, reach out and help. So I encourage you all, if you see an open to work and it makes sense, please drop a like in it or a support and then a comment on there and make a difference in someone's life. The next thing, let's talk about resumes. And again, if you have questions, please drop them in the comments and we'll add them. But when I started my resume, when I was still Sergeant Major Quinn 7 to 8 years ago, and I started my first resume, the first thing I did was I went back like the last 10 years and I grabbed all my NCOERs, all my evals. I grabbed all my awards and I started pulling out the top, like most proud, biggest number of accomplishments in there. And I put like a resume format. I did like the little blurb at the top that said, senior military intelligence and operations leader responsible for 17,000 people in 45 countries with an annual budget in excess of 300 million, whatever, and then I had like all the jobs, all the accomplishments from there. And it went to like 2, 3, 4 pages. And I remember trying to get it down to 2 pages. And I was just like, at one point I shrunk the font a little bit. I extended the margins. I was deleting words to get extra stuff on the page. And I look back now and I'm like, my God, what were you doing? Right? See, the reason that I was struggling was that I was trying to fit everything that was Sergeant Major Quinn onto a 2-page document, like 24 years of military experience, all the jobs, all the things that I'd done. And the reality is that is not what a resume is. A resume is a list of your knowledge, skills, and experience that shows that you are a best candidate for one job, right? So if you are applying to be a project manager in a certain industry or at a certain company, that resume should be the stuff that directly relates that job. If you're looking at being an HR manager, it should directly relate to those jobs. So as you look in the job description, it talks about all the requirements. Those are the things that you need to be hitting. If there's other things that were not listed in the job description, but based on your informational interviews or past experience, that those are priorities for those jobs, those need to be highlighted. and you got to take out the extra stuff, right? That stuff can come out in the interview and questions, whatever else. But the most important thing is that your 2-page resume, 1 to 2 page resume for the private sector, needs to speak specifically to the job you want to do and your qualifications. So you should have everything they're looking for married up on there. They should be quantified accomplishments. They should be relevant. They should be recent enough to make sense. I remember my buddy Gary Steensgaard was talking about that. And let's leave that one up, this comment up. I remember my buddy Gary Steensgaard was talking about, and I shared this a couple weeks ago. He went to a Society of Human Resource Management meeting, and he shared his resume with a senior HR manager or director that's in SHRM. And she said, wow, this is a fantastic resume, Gary, but it doesn't, I read this and I'm like, wow, this guy's great, but it doesn't tell me that you can do this job, right? That's the key. When a recruiter looks at it, do they see that they can do this job, or is there a bunch of translation, or do you have to figure out, like, do they have these skills or whatever? And every time you make them have to translate or make them have to think or make them have to say, like, do they know how to do this stuff? If there's a better candidate, that person vaults you, right? 1 to 2 pages specific to the role on the resume. It is not a work history. It needs to be relevant and tailored. All right, so the question, do you recommend an open to work banner during the transition from service? For example, seeking a SkillBridge CSP position. I feel like maybe misleading some employers. So the open to work banner is, there's no way to search on LinkedIn for SkillBridge internships. Meaning if you're on LinkedIn Recruiter, aside from typing in SkillBridge, if you're on LinkedIn Recruiter, open to work is for jobs, right? So what I tell people is I recommend open to work when you are 2 to 3 months max from the day you can start working, paid employment, right? That's what, anything over to that, there's no real value and you'll just be open to work forever, right? Because if they're posting a job or if they're sourcing people for it, right? They need someone now or within a month and a half, whatever. If they can wait 3, 4, 6 months, it's not going to work. Now, for the SkillBridge, I do not recommend the open to work banner at all for that. You're too far out to actually be open to work. But what I do recommend is that you add the word, maybe you put it at the bottom of the about section, maybe you put it at the back end of your headline or whatever, that you are seeking a SkillBridge internship starting on this date, right? And what that'll do is it'll enable you to, you'll populate if someone searches for SkillBridge as one of the keywords. Like that's about the best you can do, but don't put the banner up there, because if you do it while you're looking for SkillBridge, you're going to have that open to work banner up there for 9 to 12 months. And then people that see it start to wonder, my God, they haven't found a job in 9 to 12 months. Like what's going on? Or maybe they're not a high performer. And so I do not recommend it for SkillBridge. Just add that you're available. And honestly, the vast majority, it may seem like there's a lot, there's like 900 to 1,000 companies on SkillBridge, but I'm telling you, I have calls every week. Companies have no idea what SkillBridge is still. Millions of companies out there. So I would just put it in as keywords. And really, honestly, what I will tell you is focus on reaching out to companies, explaining what SkillBridge is. And if they don't have an MOU, connect them with us. We'll process the paperwork for a very small fee. Very small fee to the company, never to the service member. All right, let's get going. Let's talk about resilience, right? And, great example, 9, 12, 18 months out. So you start the transition. I was talking to Tony Pounds today from DLA Careers. He's the targeted recruiting team for people getting to DLA. And he said, starting the transition at 18 to 24 months out, it's just not enough time to do everything you have to. It's difficult with everything. And I know there's a lot of people that start at 12 or 9 or 6, right? So I want people to understand that the bulk of the preparation for your transition is not resumes and jobs. It is figuring out what you want to do. It is building your network. It is getting your VA or your medical appointments done. It's talking to family members and figuring out where you want to live, right? There's a whole lot that goes into this. It took me 200 phone calls to figure out just what I wanted to do, being an HR consultant, right? Not HR consulting, and how to explain I was qualified for that. And so, I want people to be ready for this. Like, you're going to start your transition. You're going to be hot and heavy a year, 9 months out. And you can't start applying to jobs till you're 2 to 3 months from the day you can start, right? So when we talk about all this time, what's happening is, like, I was at job fairs, I was networking, I had 3,000 plus connections at the end of my year. I was going to events, I was applying online, I was getting referrals, I was interviewing, and I was doing all of this. And it wasn't until, like, literally 1 to 2 months out that I had a CEO say, I want to make you an offer. And it took like 2-3 weeks from that. And it took 2 weeks to get a start date and everything else like that to actually lock it in. So I want people to be prepared ahead of time that you need to be resilient throughout your whole transition. And I'm not talking just retirees. I'm talking about your whole transition. It is not going to be, I'm starting my transition, I'm building a resume, I'm applying online, and I'm good, right? That is not how it works. There's going to be a lot of failures. There's going to be rejections. There's going to be a lot of networking events. There's going to be a lot of following up, like a lot of additional tasks that are in line with the transition, classes, TAP, DOL employment vets, training, VA stuff, like all of this. And what I want people to do is be mentally prepared and resilient, that it is a long process. And the sooner you start, the more you can spread it out, and it will be less stressful. Had I started a year earlier, I would have had the network I needed. The 200 phone calls in 2 years is a lot easier than 200 phone calls in 9 months. I would have spread everything out. I would have had a larger network, and I would have had it locked all in. So I just tell you, think about that from a resilience standpoint. How do you manage that? And know that for most of us, we have never, ever experienced rejection. The amount of times that we do in the job search. And it's not that you are not a high performer. It's not that you are not awesome. Sometimes it's somebody else had the relationship. Somebody else was just a better candidate. Somebody else had more of a specific type of experience, right? But first runner-up is first loser. So, like, keep going. Set up your battle rhythm for your applications, your networks, your connection requests. Remember my 10-5-3 rule for growing your network, and just keep grinding until you find your success. It will come, especially if you put in the work to learn and grow. All right. Whew. Almost 2/3 of the way through. We still got a bunch of topics. Let's talk about thank you notes, right? And thank yous in general. I don't know if it's a military veteran thing or if it's a society thing, but I say thank you all the time. Like, I genuinely thank the servers at the restaurant, the person that seats me, anyone that holds a door open for me. Like whatever it is, I consciously say thank you all the time now. But when I was getting out, I remember this guy was trying to mentor me on monetizing my network by charging service members. And I never have charged service members, never will charge service members. But I remember, like, he kept sending me, like, I got on a call with him because I was networking with everyone, and he, like, kept trying to prompt me to do things and and I remember calling him and asking him a question, and he answered, and I asked him another question, and he just kind of went off on me for being basically calling me an ingrate, not saying thank you, not valuing his time and experience. And then he blocked me. And my first thing was, oh my God, this guy's a jerk, right? Like, what the heck? He called me, like, da 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 da. But then you always have to look at the other perspective. I was like, you know what? I did ask him a question, and I didn't say thank you. And why is that? If he answered, why didn't I say thank you? And I think some of it is aligned with our being accustomed to intrusive leadership in the military, right? You always have leaders above you that are going out of their way to check in on you, to encourage you, to inspire you, to motivate you if you need it. That's intrusive leadership, but it doesn't happen out here, right? Out here, it's about relationships. And so I constantly have to, like, you don't even say thank you a lot of times in the military. I mean, some people do, but because they're expecting it, you're expecting it, you're all on the same team, common goals, common mission, everything else like that. But you need to out here. You need to say thank you. And so what I tell people is that you need anytime and every time someone invests time in you, a call, answers a question, gives you advice, like whatever, makes an introduction, whatever it is, you need to say thank you. And I'll tell you, you should say thank you. And if they're new and they invested any serious amount of time, whether it's a call or whatever, you should follow up within a day with a short thank you note. And it just could be a message on LinkedIn. But that follow-up shows that you valued their time. It shows that you valued their effort, and that you have the emotional intelligence to kind of like go back and say, hey, thank you, right? And it makes people more willing to help. The beauty of the LinkedIn message, and leave this up, the beauty of the thank you note on LinkedIn is that it's always there. So if you reach out again in the future, or they reach out, they're going to see that you sent them a note thanking them for their advice, their time, whatever. They know you've met. Even if they forgot it, it's going to be there. So I'm a big fan of this. Now, when it comes to the job search, if you are interviewing, if you're doing on-site, if you go through the process, if you've interviewed at 1, 2, multiple stages, like real interviews, and even if you didn't get selected, I'm a big fan of sending thank you notes. Right now, I interviewed at EY the same time I interviewed at ProSphere. ProSphere came through. EY said they would match or beat the offer. And I went back and said to EY, hey, I'm going to take this other job. Please don't do the process to get the business case in and all that other stuff. And then I sent thank you notes to the recruiter and the 3 partners that I'd interviewed with. I went to Hallmark. I bought a pack of notes and I wrote thank you notes, put stamps on them, and I addressed them to the EY office, in Tyson's, attention, their name. And they got to them a couple days, a couple weeks, whatever. They got to them. Like, they got the letters and they all responded. They all sent me notes back. And one of the partners, Joe, actually invited me to breakfast 3-4 months later just to check in on me. And so when I was getting close to a year at that first job and I outgrew the role and realized I was interested in EY again, I reached out to Joe and he was like, I wanted to hire you a year ago. Let's get going. And that's how I got there. But I share with people, like, do not overlook the thank you note. I even sent them when I didn't get selected and got responses back. You never know where people are going to go. You never know if people are going to drop out. You're showing that you value the time and experience. And if you don't want to send it in the mail, or if you think they're remote or they're not going to get it, my hack for that is to handwrite a note on some nice paper, take a photo and attach it to an email and say, hey, just wanted to send you this attached thank you note for your time and effort. It just a little bit extra can help you stand out. All right. So Michael, we've got, hello, 16-year retired Air Force veteran looking for full-time remote work due to disabilities. Any specific advice? I feel like Olivia did this. You put that one up on purpose, Olivia. So Michael, what I don't get in the message is what you're looking to do. And I would not recommend putting due to my disabilities on there. I know that there is the American Disabilities Act that prevents employers from discriminating based on disabilities, but when you broadcast that you have that, you open yourself up to discrimination. They're not allowed to ask, but they just have to talk about your ability to do the role. But when you broadcast it, you make yourself open to that. And a lot of people could think what those disabilities are and how challenging they are. So what I would encourage you, Michael, to do is focus on figuring out what roles that what you want to do that is a remote eligible career, and then making yourself a best candidate from there. And do not mention the disability part, right? Make yourself a best candidate, let them hire you, and then in the offer letter or whatever, ask if you need any special accommodations, and then you can say it, because then they can't discriminate. They already said you're the best candidate, right? It's not a bait and switch at all. It's totally legal, right? And you're still going to knock it out of the park. All right, 4 minutes. My biggest post of the week was about job negotiation, salary negotiation earlier in the week. And man, I'm going to tell you, a lot of great comments, a lot of good engagement. Some JERKS is out there saying, oh, companies are all evil, they're all bait and switch or whatever. But at the end of the day, I had a veteran reach out and say they got, they were talking about a job. They're looking at making a move. They were in the government and in a federal government agency. And they said, hey, this company, when they talked to the recruiter about the role, the recruiter said they thought the range was like this range to this range. And then when the offer came, the offer was a little bit low, was significantly lower than that, but not amazingly lower. But it came with a bonus. And I said, when you add the bonus with the range, it was only like 10, 15K less. And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. And I'm like, so just go back to them and say, hey, when we spoke, you mentioned this range. Can you get me into that range? And they did, right? They went back, added the numbers, they added to the base salary and added the numbers. And it moved forward. And a lot of people were like, great, that's the way it is. And a lot of people were like, hey, it's a bait and switch, companies are evil. And I'm going to tell people it's business, it's not personal, right? And so the company, if a company thinks you're the best candidate and they lowball you, you might walk and then they lose the best candidate, right? And for a candidate, if you ask for too much, the company might say no and walk, and then you lost an opportunity. So it is called salary negotiation for a reason. And so what I'm going to tell you is that the initial conversations with the recruiter are like kind of baseline, but the company needs to make an assumption or needs to make an estimate based on what you're going to bring from a revenue standpoint, what kind of production you're going to bring, and what the requirements are. And so the recruiter had an initial range. And I will tell you that if you didn't know the whole story, that there was some risk with hiring this person who is awesome, but hadn't done this specific thing before. And so I think it was a very fair offer, knowing all the details. And so what I say to everyone out there, do not take it personal. Talk about the numbers. Do your research and counter, right? This person also said, well, I might have to give up I had some cruises planned and I may not be able to do it. I said, counter, go back and say, I've got 2 cruises planned. I need a few more vacation days the first year. Like, you can ask. And that's what it is. It's salary negotiation. Like, if you go buy a car and the person gives you a different number, you don't scream and yell at them and say, you're evil. You counter or you walk. It's the same thing here, right? Put yourself in a situation where you can do your research, your value. And if all else fails and you're not sure, can you ask for it? Just call the recruiter and ask. If they're making you offers, they have said you're the best candidate. And a lot of recruiters are evaluated based on their close rate, right? So they thought they can close you. They thought it was a decent offer. Call them back, say, hey, what do you think about bumping it up X thousand? What do you think about adding the bonus? Can you give me a relocation stipend? Can you add vacation days? Can you give me free parking? Are there stock options? Is there an incentive comp plan? Can you pay for my phone? There's so much involved there. My first thing, verbally ask the recruiter what you think is negotiable and then respond, right? And do it with good nature. And then the last thing I'm going to say, I'm going to go like 2 minutes over, is part of this role was, I was talking about the individual with the role, and it was a business development role. And so what I share with people in our community is, if you are transitioning out of the military, one of the best ways to land at a higher level is to go into the defense sector or the federal government based on your relationships and your ability to drive new work, right? But what I tell people is that unless you are a general or an admiral and really have them at a high level, I do not think it is a good idea for anyone in our community to go right out of the military into a 100% business development role. And the reason being is the company's going to pay you that top dollar to give them a return on investment, right? And that's got to be not just business you win, but it's got to be revenue and margins, right? You got to bring in enough business to cover your salary plus overhead, which could be 1.5, 1.65 to break even, 2.0. So if you're making 100, you got to bring in 200 to 300 for the company to be like, hey, that was a good hire. And a lot of the federal government, state and local business development processes can take 6, 8, 12 months to go through. So you're going to be a year in, the company's going to be out a few $100,000, and they don't know if they're going to win anything. And so what I'll tell people is that when you're considering business development roles or roles with a revenue generation, business development requirement, always look for blended roles. And what I mean by that is look for roles where you have billable work and you have your business development responsibility. So when I was at EY, they started me off 15 hours a week billable and moved up to 25. And that billable work defrayed the cost of my salary to the firm and enabled me to, without as much stress, I knew that I was building enough to grow in the business development and revenue side. So when I hit year 2, I dropped a few big deals that hit and made the firm money. But those deals also came off the relationships I had on that billable work, seeing opportunities to grow the business there. And so I will tell everyone, consider that when you're getting out. If you're going to go into business development, I will always ask or recommend that people say, hey, are there billable hours you can get me that will basically give you additional runway to build that pipeline? All right, 2.5 minutes over. Thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate you joining and asking questions and engaging. And we'll see you next week.